I wanted to do a live video to continue to discuss career development and acceleration topics, to apply principles and frameworks that have been useful to me throughout my career and share that information with you and to help with mentorship, which is something that people really desire and need. People rate it as one of the top things that is required for their career development, but really only a third of the people that need it can get it. So I'm hoping through platforms like this that I can help to provide that. And I also welcome your comments and your questions if you have a career question. Happy to talk about that. But tonight I want to cover a topic that I've kind of been hearing a lot about lately. And I think it's for folks that are at a certain point in their career and have had a certain number of years of experience and perhaps have achieved a certain degree of success. And maybe this is also prevalent with other segments of people in their career. But sometimes we get to this point in our career where we feel challenged, but it's challenged because we're stressed and we're not really growing. So work is hard, but it's really missing that growth component. And for many people, and that need for growth is a requirement and also a requirement for motivation. So what I wanted to talk about tonight is looking at one piece that can potentially help to tap into that motivation and to also create growth opportunities in your current job. Because sometimes we strictly look at growth opportunities as having to leave a job, but perhaps there's things and potential we can tap into in our current jobs and in order to get growth in. And also by applying what I'm going to share with you tonight, you won't get into a pattern where you might leave a current job to a new job to get growth, just to wind up in a similar situation in a year or two or 6 months. So a lot of everything that I focus on is really centered around being data driven in our careers, having quantifiable and qualitative information and data that we can draw from in order to make sure we're making good decisions about our career. So what I specifically wanted to focus on tonight in relation to that I'm working really hard, but I'm not growing question is really to understand, are we picking the right targets in terms of the things that we're working on? And in order to pick that right target, we have to have a starting point. We have to have a clearly defined starting point and ultimately where we would like to be. Some of the challenges that I've seen through people management, coaching, and mentorship is it can be very difficult to answer that question of where do you want to be in 5 years? But you get to a point in your career where it becomes more crucial to be able to answer that question, because as we move forward in our career and have more years of experience, we definitely develop a wealth of subject matter expertise. And we want to make sure we can utilize that to the best of our degree to succeed in our career. So we need that starting point, and we need that endpoint, maybe 5 years out at least, to understand ultimately how we pick the right things to work on and the things that we target in order to get to that place. So we need a point A and we need a point B. And let's start with the end in mind. And I'd like to share with you an exercise that can help you to determine that so that you can get a sense of where you'd like to be in 5 years. Maybe you can't answer the where you'd like to be in 1 year, but this exercise can help you to answer that question. So this is called the headline exercise. Imagine that you're looking at a newspaper, online, social media post 5 years from now, and it's a headline about you. It's a headline about you that you've achieved what you wanted in your career at that point. What is that headline? What does it say? Have you achieved a certain position? Are you in a certain company? Are there certain accomplishments? Have you created a certain sense of purpose in your work? Are you working in a certain industry? Is it a combination of all those things and other things? Just take a moment, write down that headline. Think about it 5 years out. If somebody wrote a story about you and they wrote that headline, what do you want that headline to say? This helps us to take like this abstract question and an ambiguous answer and start to bring a little bit of clarity. And once we get that little bit of clarity, we could then take a next step and to gain more clarity. So after you've taken a few minutes to think about what you want to put in that headline, what would somebody say about you in 5 years that really excites you, where you want to be, where you want to go? What happens the year before that to get there? And then what happens the year before that, in the third year, and the year before that, in the second year, and the year before that, in your first year? So you work with the end in mind, and then you have that headline that somebody wrote about you that really excites you and where you want to go. And then you break it out into smaller steps, working in reverse. So try this exercise to understand where you want to be 5 years out. And if you want, you can expand it too. So one of the crucial components of like understanding what's true for you and authentic for you and answering this question is to understand what intrinsically motivates you. So that intrinsic motivation, that flow state that you don't have to kind of hack to get into, you don't have to hack to make yourself be motivated, whether it's like an exercise where you put your hands on your hips in the power pose and it changes your brain chemistry and you feel motivated, or it's a mantra type exercise, you put your shoulders back and you say a mantra and that helps you get motivated. There's a place for those types of things that can be very useful, but intrinsic motivation is when that thing is present in front of you, when that opportunity is present in front of you, you can't wait to do it. You're naturally driven towards it. And this intrinsic motivation can appear in any role that you do. So I've been a graphic designer. I've been a chief operating officer. I've led professional services. I've done digital marketing and direct to consumer e-commerce. And there's always been something in each of my roles that when the opportunity came up or I created it, I just felt like I was in this flow and highly motivated state. And for me, it's when there's like this ambiguous problem to solve that is like multi-dimensional, has multi stakeholders from different parts of the business, on the client side, on the partner side. And I have to go out and consult and get all these different data points to really understand what's going on. And then ultimately to synthesize the information and start to bring clarity from the ambiguity and ultimately create the simple and eloquent solution that I can then bring to help solve the problem. That's the type of thing that intrinsically motivates me. And I found those kinds of opportunities, that those work experiences, being a designer, being a website manager, being owner of digital marketing, direct consumer e-commerce businesses, leading professional services efforts, and working in services in general. So that intrinsic motivation can show itself in the different roles in our professional lives and also in our personal lives. So if you have an understanding of this intrinsic motivation, I really would suggest to make it part of this headline exercise. But if you don't really understand what it is, or if it's too abstract for you, here's an exercise that you can try in order to identify your own intrinsic motivation. And you may have heard this has been written about. There's been a book on it, I believe, and different practices have utilized it. And it's been effective for me. Take an inventory of the things that you do over 1 to 2 weeks. And of the things that you do, assess what really generated great energy in you. What did you feel compelled to do without really any kind of prompting? And what kind of like sucked the energy out of you? And once you have that list and you put those things into buckets, look at the things that really drove the creation of energy in you, motivation, and synthesize that information. Like understand what are the patterns in that? What are the categories that you could place that into? And then determine to just create like a quick statement about what intrinsically motivates you. For me, what that boils down to is I love helping people, like businesses, customers, find the path that they didn't see before. And I even love it even more when it's a big ambiguous challenge. And I can help to bring clarity to that circumstance and really tap into potential that people, businesses, customers weren't even aware that they had. That's what intrinsically drives me. So we've got point B, we've got the headline. Remember, think about somebody writing something about you that would really excite you and make you enthusiastic 5 years out about your career. What does that look like? And then take a step back to the fourth year, and the third year, the second year, and then to the first year. Then understand your intrinsic motivation. Look at things over 2 weeks and understand the different things that you're doing and what kind of energy it creates for you. Good energy or kind of like demotivating energy. And then turn that into a statement, categorize it and synthesize it, use those data points to bring clarity to the abstractness of intrinsic motivation and where you want to be 5 years out. So that helps you to understand where you want to go. And also, you can use the intrinsic motivation piece to evaluate where you currently are as well. Like, what percentage of that is really a part of what you're doing, and can you cultivate that more in what you're doing? But I won't go too in depth into that right now. I want to move over to point A. I want to move over to the starting point. So what I would call the baseline. It's the point, it's the present, it's the point at which we're starting from. And making an honest assessment of where we are and looking at 5 years out, 4, 3, 2, 1 years in each of those steps, and making that honest assessment of year 0 will enable us to understand the data points, which could be around skills that we need to develop, certain work experiences that we need to cultivate, certain accomplishments, certain methods, certain education that we need to get in order to get to that headline 5 years out. So what you want to do is look at yourself where you are now, look at yourself where you want to be 5 years out. And if you can't get to 5 years, think about 1 year, whatever that time frame is, and say to yourself, what are the kinds of skills that I would need in order to hit that milestone? And if you don't know, ask somebody else. Ask somebody else, go through your LinkedIn network, maybe ask a peer, maybe ask somebody more senior in your organization to help you to understand skills. Look at job descriptions, look at the minimum requirements, look at the preferred qualifications. That'll help you to understand the types of skills that you may need for that next role. Additionally, job descriptions are also helpful when you look at the summary paragraphs above. It helps you to understand the experiences that would be required. And it also helps to put it in the context of that specific industry or category, as well as for that specific company. So that helps you to scope the skills that you would need. So strategy in a tech company, strategy in an ad tech company might be different than strategy in a fintech company, might be different than strategy in a CPG company, etc. So there might be general skills and then industry specific skills and even company specific skills that you would need to consider when you're calculating the data points for your baseline. So use these different methods and think of some others to understand how you can get data to make a decision about the skills that you would need to get to the next milestone. And then what you want to do next is you want to determine and honestly ask yourself, to what degree do I have this skill? Is this a priority skill? Is this a skill that I want to develop, that I'm motivated to develop? Will it be kind of drudgery if I aim to develop it? And then if it is kind of drudgery, is it because it's hard to do, or I'm just something I would really not like to do? So is it difficult? You really want to ask yourself that, because sometimes difficulty can create fear, and maybe you're not going to do it because it's hard or you're fearful. And if that's the question, start breaking it down into smaller steps and easier steps and assessing the easier steps to see if that's something that those smaller steps that you would do. That helps you to understand like the data point around difficulty and fear, if that is really an accurate measure of something, that a skill you would like to learn. Is it just because it's hard and you're kind of turned off from that? Or is it truly because something you intrinsically aren't into? And that little assessment data extraction, data collection piece, I recommend doing it anywhere. Whenever you think you don't want to do something, assess it because of the difficulty. And then the motivation can be managed as you break it into smaller pieces, and it's easier. You'll be more motivated to do it. And as you accomplish the smaller tasks, you'll create more motivation for yourself and you'll move on to the next thing. So just a word of caution, don't say no to something because it's difficult or you fear it. Say no because it's absolutely not your preference and it's not a direction that you would want to go in. So at the point A, we have the milestone 1 to 5 years out. We're looking at an attribute like skills to understand what are the skills that we might need for the different milestones. We're doing an honest assessment of ourselves of the degree in which we have that skill. And then if you find skills that you need to develop more competency, then prioritize those skills development through learning or talking with peers, managers, direct reports, cross-functional stakeholders to understand if there are opportunities where they need some help, and maybe you can start to cultivate those skills from experience. And that's kind of like a 2-for-1 versus taking learning courses. Both approaches are great, but likely if you need to develop a skill, you're also going to need to utilize it, and you're going to need to create experiences around it and ultimately accomplishments. So speaking of experiences and accomplishments, think about the experiences and accomplishments that you may need to gather in order to get to that next milestone. And then think about different ways to collect the data and opportunities on how to make those experiences happen and the accomplishments and the outcomes. All right, so I've been talking for about 17, 18 minutes, and I hope this mentor session, this live session has been helpful. You can watch it. It should be recorded and posted on the different platforms I'm currently broadcasting to. But just to sum up, it's very important to take a data-driven approach to our careers. Sometimes we just step into things versus moving forward towards them in a clear direction in a targeted way. And one way that we can create that direction for us is to use data to inform. And we need to understand the starting point and an end point in order to apply that data in a way that it's very useful. So start with the end in mind. Use a headline exercise to understand 5 years out, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Understand what intrinsically motivates you and how that informs the milestones that you want to achieve. Look at your starting point, your baseline, your point A, and honestly assess yourself across skills, experiences, and accomplishments. And look at your milestones and speak with others to understand what skills, experiences, and accomplishments that you might need to cultivate in order to get to that next milestone. Make that assessment, determine a set of skills that you need to acquire or experiences and accomplishments, and then start to acquire them, add them to your inventory of your career and move towards that milestone. If you have any questions on this topic, let me know. In the future, I'm going to get more into how you target the right things to work on and the right goals to focus on so that you're starting to produce reliable success. And even with each success, you're increasing the trajectory of the output or the accomplishments or the success in your career so that you can succeed faster. Again, we're going to use data points, frameworks, and we're not going to take a haphazard approach to how we map out our careers. So leave any comments in the videos, ask any further questions, feel free to DM me. I'm going to call it a night. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share some of my experiences and what I've learned. I hope you're able to apply it to your career. I love doing this kind of work, in addition to the work I do on a daily basis in my profession. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about career development, acceleration, and mentorship. Have a great night.